Okay. Well, I think it was Lorraine last time said that this session she would like to talk about acceptable documentation. And so I was kind of hoping that she would join us, but it's always a good topic. Before we get to that, though, I want to see if anybody's got questions or is aware of the new application form that they are going to roll out next month.
I'm not aware.
I was gonna say, Vicky, your head snapped.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Barbara, do you know if they have a date? I don't know that we can
Yes,
do it.
yes. June
January.
or January. Well, you already know this. You should be telling it. January 3rd is the date that we can get the new applications, but there is going to be a little bit of a grace period. It's a short grace period, but there is a little bit.
Very short.
Yeah, not like their usual grace periods.
I think it's February 9th.
Is it that late? Okay.
Yeah. Is when they will, I don't know what they'll do, if they will turn them back if there are in the only older forms. Is that what you
Yeah,
understand?
yeah. They if once past that deadline, like they did several years ago, you know.
Do you use the new application for supplementals also?
Yes.
Yes.
It will be,
I went through a practice run yesterday with five supplementals contained, all allied and one new female patriot. And I will tell you, it was tedious. But that's because it was five. Going, pretending like I was doing it
right.
as a reviewer and with another person checking. It was tedious.
What was tedious about it, Barbara? I mean, the application
The,
mechanisms
the
are
checking the lineage. Well, in this particular set of supplemental applications, they were a lot of them were old, and there had to be a lot of updating, and you had to go into finding the most recent, and that could have been either a supplemental or a main application, and it was just very tedious, the double checking.
Okay.
And the other thing, I know I was doing it differently than what they're going to be requiring, where you don't have to go back and look at the documents, but
I like looking at the documents.
the errors that were found were a result of going back and checking the documents for their citations as well as information. So I don't think, this is being recorded, so I better be quiet. Let me just say that I think if your reviewers have the time and can double check the documents, it would enhance the process, but we're not required to go back and look into the
What I
documents.
like about it, Barbara, though, is what a training opportunity it is for all of us. I love it when Clay's here when I can talk about this. And Clay, please excuse me for using you yet again as a wonderful example. But for about 3 years, when I was registrar instead of regent, Clay got real over the top excited about genealogy. I mean, we were all kind of trying to pull her down a little bit. She was just going gun ho, and she still is, just not with the same. It's a different passion. She's volunteering now at one of the research areas here in town, and she was popping out applications and supplementals like they were just ice cream for anybody to eat. And so I started reviewing them, and I'm like, oh my goodness, she spelled this word wrong. I mean, the I and the E were, oh, I was getting down to such finite detail, which was important. But what came out of the whole thing was when I started relaxing and interacting with Clay, her and I both learned so much. Both of us are better genealogists because of the years of us reviewing one another's work. People think differently. Barbara, you've brought this up so many times. And when you start seeing how another person works, you have an awesome opportunity for practical education right there.
Oh, I don't disagree with you, Susan. What I'm just saying is that the one thing that I chose to do for my first time to test myself was extremely complex. And we worked and worked and worked, and we kept finding little teeny weeny errors, such as one of the copying and pasting citations had a PP and one only had a P for the exact same page. And so it was just little tiny things like that. And
I
another thing,
understand
another thing that was real that we couldn't figure out for a while was in populating the comma on the fillable form looked like a period and printed as a period.
So what did you have to do?
I took it out because I don't put in the data, the commas, because it's like for example, Columbia, Richland County, South Carolina, I don't put commas between them because it's one more thing. I've just never done that because it's one more thing to type in and make a mistake and one more thing to proofread. But it took us a while to figure out why they were being printed and looked like commas. I mean, looked like periods, but they were really commas.
And then that's something like that I don't think that they would kick it back for. But I hear what you're saying.
Oh,
You just admit it.
no.
You
Well,
know, like Barbara, some of the stuff that they've had to wade through, though, I think that this will really help the entire process.
and again, it depends upon what volunteer is looking. I mean, I have been told by somebody who is actively in that group of volunteering that it will just depend upon which volunteer is reviewing your paper.
And that's okay. You know, I mean, it'll just help us to be able to turn out
Exactly.
better products.
Exactly.
I'm right now working on a set of 3 supplementals that have been sent in to AIRs. And the second one, the National Genealogist said, please get in touch with your volunteer genealogist committee. I turned one of the 3 over to Darlene, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited that she's here today. And what I have found, and I got to go through your package, Darlene, and I will probably this afternoon, is that she had 78 pages for her supporting documents. I got through page 20 and realized out of the first 20, I only needed 10. So see things like this, you know, now Barbara, you're an excellent genealogist, and I tell everybody you're the best one we got in the state. So just deal with
No,
it.
no.
But what I'm saying is that this is a woman that she did an analysis. I didn't even see it until the very end, and I've got to go through that because it doesn't connect to this, and I don't understand what's going on with it. But she is not stupid. She does great research. It's just we've got to get the information out there on how to fill out these applications and what it is that the genies really want. That's part of what we're doing here with these meetings, these Zoom meetings, is
Go ahead.
no, it's just sharing that, our experiences, having questions, referring to the genealogical guidelines, because that's what they keep slapping us upside the head with.
I mean, you mentioned analysis. So many registrars are just petrified. I mean, I've written some for others, like I'm sure you have, and that's another area of if you can learn how to write an analysis, it usually gets through.
Ask Clay, she does a good job. She helped me with the first AIR that we had, and I was petrified. I'm like, is there a form? What do we have to do? You know, and she's like, oh, you just write it. Kind of watched her, and you're muted, Clay. Okay. Any other question? Oh, the other thing about what's going on with the application is we've alluded to it, but you have to have 2 people review the application before you submit it. They do not have to sign it, but the accountability comes from putting their national number on that form and their name that they have actually reviewed the application.
I have
Now,
a question, Susan, about that.
okay.
Well, they just sent out, our registrar general said that a registrar can be one of those reviewers.
I'm hearing that.
My question, because one of my reviewers is going to do supplementals, will she be allowed to be one of the reviewers? Can the applicant of the supplemental be a reviewer?
The
Do
way
you
I
know
look,
the answer to that?
I think so. I absolutely do think so. I think what they're trying to do is to get us to look at these applications. Even if it's an application that we've put together ourselves, basically, did we review our work? I hate to say that, but that's how bad it is out there, you guys.
I interpret it as meaning they want sets of eyes on it.
No, not anymore. They made a clarification, because I asked at the GRI whether whether it was 3 people, whether the registrar could be one. And the answer at that time was, we'll get back to you. I don't think they had, totally thought it through. But I believe in this last week's Shooting Stars, it specifically says that of the 2, the registrar may be one. Right, Susan?
I talked to Allison
But
Strange about this a couple of nights ago, and she said definitely.
But
So does that mean that the reviewer is one review, the registrar is one reviewer? So you have the registrar and then you really only have one other reviewer?
Correct.
I personally recommend that you take this awesome opportunity to get 2 other people to review your application. I'm just saying.
I think the registrar is fine as the reviewer if she's not the one who did the research.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah, that's why
That's
I
a
look
good
at it.
point.
Yeah,
But-
but legitimately, the registrar can be the reviewer. Reviewing of the research is totally different from reviewing of the citations.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when we review, we're reviewing all of it, right?
Correct. But what I'm saying is, you might have somebody who does all the lineage research and copies the citation down to give to the registrar, and maybe that lineage research person isn't doing the site. I mean, I can give you an example of a chapter nearby. We have a chapter with a lineage researcher who all she does is the research, copies the citations and gives it to the registrar. The registrar does the citations.
Wow.
Because she's not comfortable. She doesn't have enough experience yet in doing citations.
Whatever it takes. One of the mottos of the Genealogy Commission, which is a combination of all of the committees under genealogy, is that genealogy is a team sport, and they're really starting to show it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, at first everybody's like, "Oh no, well, no, you want your comrades to look it over first instead of having a national genie look at it first." That to me just makes sense.
I'm totally grateful for Susan's review because I'm not a good typist and I make lots of mistakes, and I'm not a good proofreader. So that's a monumental thing for me.
And that's really helped us, Clay. I mean, yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is, okay, back to the application form, is that you have to sign it in blue ink. Those are the 2 big changes, to have 2 people review each form and sign in blue ink. Anything signed in black ink, so the current used application, black. The new one, blue. And they will be returned if they don't have blue ink. Now, right now, if you sign it in purple ink, they return it. So that's not really new. It's just their way of doing it.
But you can sign the present applications in either blue or black right now.
Go with that. I thought
Yes. Right now
Okay.
you can. That was a question either on the doc or something that Cindy Parnell mentioned, that right now, these applications, they don't care whether it's blue or black, but once the new applications, it is blue. And like you said, it will be returned.
The other thing that you said was, trying to check. We need to check every generation to see if it's people that are already known by the DAR. And I've had situations where a man in a marriage, his first marriage, he was known by the DAR, but then he popped out. We just barely tapped on it, but he was still in the GRS. And so, like Barbara's talking about, going through and looking for the most recent submitted application, they wrote about this in the Genealogical Gems, and they did a very good job of explaining it, and I appreciated it because it is confusing. And so look at that article. I gave you guys all a copy of it in the email that had the link to this meeting. And it's a very easy to follow article on how to find the most recent application for a particular person. Are there any other questions about the application? Go ahead, Vicky. You're muted, honey.
Yeah, my dogs were barking. Um, so that article is in our email.
There's a news there's a newsletter called the Genealogy Gems in your email. The
Okay.
article is in that. There was
Okay.
a short little like blog called the Shooting Stars or Shooting Star.
Yeah.
And that was about this new application. And then the Genealogy Gems just came out. And Barbara, do you know, is that on a regular basis or just when they feel like it?
Yeah, it's supposed to be on a regular basis. Is it Jennifer Dobbins?
I think it's every other month.
It's
Every 2
Dobbins.
months.
It's Dobbins, and she's an outstanding genealogist. She's a national chair. She's not I forgot what she's a national chair. Janine Dobbins.
Yep.
Janine Dobbins. I believe she was the one in charge of the first GRI and possibly responsible for getting that started.
I know she gave several presentations during the GRI. So
That's another thing too, is these communications that we get, try to remember some of the names of these leaders, because every once in a while you may end up having a communication with that individual.
Doc System is a really good place to watch them also. Like Susan Johnston is somebody that responds to majority of the Doc System questions. And one thing I've noticed, Facebook is still alive for a lot of the different genealogy DAR groups. I'm not going to say that's bad. Some people can follow that better, but it's more professional, more on topic in the doc. It is pointed. It is not mixed up with, well, my experiences were in this long dialogue as far as, it's, you understand that the people on the doc system know that they are asking the top-notch women in the DAR particular questions, and so they keep it pointed, and it's good. All right, so there was a question about what is acceptable documentation, and I am so glad that Barbara's with us. I wasn't sure if she was going to join us or not. Do you see her expression? I mean, she's like, here we go. Barbara, what I decided to do, and maybe this is cheating, but I taught a class. I taught a 4-part class called What the Genies Want You to Know. And I pulled up one of the sessions called Supporting Documents Good to Know. And I'm going to go ahead and we could just walk through the slides on this. And I think that's just, for me, the best way to do this. If I could remember how to share my screen, where to go. Used to be up here. Maybe we won't do this. Oh, there we go. You guys see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's kind of like UPM. It's like, I don't know what you're looking at, So I think a lot of us know that, there are different kinds of names for different supporting documents. And of course, we've heard of vital records, census records, cemetery records, court records, Bible records, and published sources. And those are the ones that we're going to talk about today as far as acceptable documentation. I will prelude that to say that usually when you hear the word acceptable, we're going to get into more of the latter ones, the court records, Bible records, and published sources, because those are the ones that are not as cut and dry. They're a little bit more confusing. What you need to know, though, is that Vital records for birth, marriage, and death are preferred for the first 3 generations. And when I say preferred, I mean, they kind of want to know why they're not getting it if they don't have it. Now, obituaries, if they're well written and they've got all the information as far as where the deceased was born. I've been working with some great obituaries recently that give the exact date of birth and the exact location of birth and death and parents. And if you've got that, then you can possibly get by with not having the actual vital record. But those are not everyone for sure. I don't know that you can see it real well, but there's this little chart I've got here called Vital Records Chart. And I can send this to you if you would like it.
Yes, please.
What was that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Oh, never mind. I have it.
Do you have it?
Yep.
What
And
it is just to let you know that vital records did not just overnight start all at the same time in the United States. It's a beautiful history to the origination of vital records and one that I enjoy very much. But you're going to see that the majority of them start 1910 to 1950. However, you've got Rhode Island's got vital records since 1853. But then you get down to Oklahoma, uh, Oregon, 1908, 1903. What are some of the Louisiana didn't have them until 1914. So do you see the span? I see a lot of questions on the doc or on Facebook. It says, I don't understand why I can't find a death certificate for my ancestor that was born in 1830. I'm like, well, you know, probably didn't have one when they died in, you know, 1890, for instance. But you don't know. You have to kind of go out and look.
Sometimes, because I talked with the state archives, and because I needed to find a death certificate for my third great grandmother, and she died during the time that she should have had a death certificate. However, there was a pandemic going on, and a lot of people were just not filling the paperwork. Did I lose your sound?
Nope.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah.
I mean, we tried for years to get vital records standardized, and it was a long, hard ordeal.
Well,
And it's
people
going to be
don't like to fill out forms, so you have to make it hurt to get them to do it sometimes.
However, in some of the Northeast states, why am I going to admit someone? You might find, I know I have found in court records where families went and recorded their whole family, kind of like a family Bible record right there in the
Oh, yeah.
court records, because they were trying to figure out how do we do these vital records.
in New England, a lot of the town clerks recorded birth records. And for example, Vermont, the requirement began in 1800.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. Susan, you know the chart that you put up?
Yeah.
I use that chart and I wanted to bring it to the attention that you need to double check because there are some errors on
Okay.
that. And one other thing that you said, if I may add, about the obituary. Susan Johnston was asked recently on the doc about obituary versus vital records, say in the third generation. And a lot of other people saying, oh, yes, if an obituary has everything you need, go ahead. And Susan made a statement that when they say that vital records are expected, that is the guideline that you should be going for. I'm curious. I know that we were allowed obituaries during the COVID period when it was very difficult to get vital records from agencies that were closed down. I'm curious as to whether who is having success using obituaries in the third generation for complete information. I'm still not using them unless we can't get a vital record.
The other thing I've
There's a
read,
statement about there's a
Susan
statement.
Johnston trumps, I mean, if she said that, she does trump most people, but a lot of people are complaining that they don't want to have prospective members go through all the additional expenses of these
Yeah.
vital records.
I know, I understand that. And I just was curious because I know of a couple of registrars. Now, this was several years ago whose, they got an error. They were asked to supply the obituary because it was during the time period that they are available in that particular state or region. I'm still asking my applicants to supply them unless we have a situation like, I think it was Clay talking about where one didn't exist in South Carolina, and I've had a number of cases where the DHEC has done the search and they cannot find anything. So then we resort to the obituary and, whatever records we need to be able to fill in the dates. I'm just curious if anybody has had have sent an obituary for the third generation and not had any problems, even when a death certificate should be in existence.
I think most of the people on this call are doing mostly supplementals. And so that's the other side of it. They've already been verified through the first
I
or
mean,
second.
yeah, but you could be going in on your mother that has
Yeah.
been verified, but not the third. I just
So
was
you're right.
I just was curious if anybody had any experience. I'd like to find out. Um, I just would like to say
I'm
personally.
trying to remember James. What did we do with James? Do you remember what was on James? Jane Page?
Jane Page.
Yeah.
I know we had a couple of obituaries in her packet.
I mean, it was an incredible application because the gravestones had total genealogies on them. And I'm thinking that we use a lot of newspaper clippings in that.
I'd have to go back and look. I do know we had some obituaries in her
I
package,
mean,
though.
we had vital records for, I'm sure, Gen 1, Gen 2. But there was some family issues where some stuff wasn't available and the newspaper records covered it.
So
Yeah,
this next,
sorry.
what?
No, that's okay. That's okay.
This next slide, I just wanted to, a lot of people want to send in index entries. Ancestry does this great job of saying, we're not going to send you a picture because all it is an index. There's a couple of things that if you're going to use an index, which I would use with a lot of caution, that you need to know. Number one, is the information complete, including the names of the parents? Or is it just, like in California, they've got a good index, but it gives, I believe, just the mother's maiden name. You don't have your father's name or her first name, so it's not complete. And then also, there's some really bad indexes out there that were made out of like just taking information off of family group sheets that a variety of people would put together, which hadn't been really checked by anyone. If you see something that's called like, go and look at the source where they get these indexes from. There is a source called Looking for Bears or something to that. Yeah. And Hunting for Bears or something like that. They've got a lot of really good information, but it is not backed up by anything. So you could use that as clues. And that's the other thing that, the genies, and this is in the genealogical guidelines. If there is an index, then there needs to be a record. Indexes don't just populate themselves. It's not like a city directory. If it's an index of a vital record, there's a record.
Susan, I saw an error last year where the genealogist, the registrar sent in an index, and the statement by the genealogist was exactly what you said. If there is an index, there is a record. Most of the time, now you could have a situation where only an index has survived and the original records have not. But he was like, where there is an index, there is a record. Please supply the record. It was tough to find. It was a marriage certificate that we needed to prove parentage of the child. But we got it, but it was hard.
Well, and a lot of the indexes on Ancestry are actually indexes of records on Family Search. So if you look at the index, one of the last entries will be this like file number 1044376. And every time I see that, if I think I'm interested, I will take that 1044376 number and go to the catalog on Family Search and find it. The sad thing about it is some of those indexes, you have to go to a repository, one of the approved places where you can look at family search files. But still, that's just proof that there's an index and there is a record. So, any questions about that? Okay, so don't forget, in addition to your typical birth, marriage, and death certificate, there are compilations and there are delayed birth records. Now, compilations are what I come to mind is like in the Barber collection. And now that's New England and back in the what I don't know what time frame it covers. Do you know, Barbara?
Yeah, I have to use it a lot, for the New England stuff, but yes, it's in the 1800s.
The early 1800s, yeah.
It can go as early as that.
Well, it doesn't get into the late 1800s much that I've seen.
The one I'm working on right now, I think it went at least to the 1878.
Okay.
But, I think it's just variable because of the different locations in New England that they were compiling the information from.
Now, Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it is it's similar to a town clerk where everybody said, come and record your family, and the clerk would compile this large list of this child was born on this date to this guy and this girl. I mean, where else would they have got the Barbara? I know there's a whole study.
I've forgotten the history behind it, but if I'm not mistaken, there was an individual with the last name of Barber that went to locating records, whether it was like the one that's going through my mind at the moment was they were cemeteries. They were actual headstones. And that's in the Barber collection. And then
Really?
yes, and then they would go, I mean, but you can double check me on this, but I know that the one that I'm submitting for another applicant, we're submitting some cemetery headstone inscriptions. But they also had, I think they also went to town records.
Well, for the kid, this situation, this conversation, just know that there are compilations of vital information that would be similar to vital records. Those are acceptable depending upon the same factors. Did they try to cover everybody in the community? It's not just somebody's family history that got put together. If there was an effort to be very inclusive of everyone, then it's a good compilation.
A lot of journals, like for example, in South Carolina, the South Carolina Genealogy Society does a journal for the state, and then each of the chapters does a journal. And people like Mike Becknell and Brent Holcomb find documents, find Bibles, they go to the courthouses and they transcribe and they give a statement of where the records were. It's essentially a provenance, but they just said a lot of those journal pages will be accepted if you put in the society that's sponsoring it, the journal page, and then if there's a statement about where the records came from.
That is so
I've
important.
used a lot of these various South Carolina journals, and all of them have been accepted.
That's nice to know, Barbara. Because I think that they really do try to be not focused on one family. They're doing a genealogy widespread search instead of, drilling down. And then don't forget delayed birth records. Are you aware of what delayed birth record? Is there anybody that's not aware of what a delayed birth record is? Is that Vicky, does that mean you don't know what it is? Okay, delayed birth records. I'm gonna say had something to do with Social Security, but it was about late 1930s and 1940s. People would have to prove, especially if they wanted any kind of social welfare program, is where it kind of started. And they would have to prove their birth and they would have to prove their parentage and all that. Well, they were never given a birth certificate. So what they would have to do is either have every state had its own laws for doing it, but they would have to have 2 to 3 proofs of the information that they were sharing. Many times you would see it would be an affidavit of a sibling that was older. My own great-grandmother's delayed birth record, she used two of her children's birth certificates as to, which cracks me up because she's the one that supplied the information for her children's birth certificates, and she used that as documentation to qualify to get her delayed birth certificate. I also have on another whole different branch a genealogist who passed away long before I did, and never, of course, met her, and she never had any children, so she was a collateral line. But she went out and she processed delayed birth certificates for just about everybody in her line, all the way back into the late 1600s. And I'm not saying that they're out there for everybody. It's hit and miss, but you should look because they've got some amazing. I believe Thomas Jefferson's got a delayed birth certificate. So, yeah,
Interesting.
which is very cool. So they do exist. Don't be afraid of them. They're awesome. And a lot of times you can find out even more information about that family from the delayed birth certificate than just the birth certificate, you know. So here's Barbara. This is from the Barber collection, isn't it?
Oh, my glasses on. This is
The Vital Records of Rhode Island, 1636 to 1850.
by James Arnold.
So maybe it's not, but there are these compilations around.
I'm gonna have, while you're showing your slides, I'm gonna have to pull the one that I'm working on.
But this is what I was able to find in this Vital Record of Rhode Island. It's underlined here. And it's so funny because Jill Darnell popped in for a second and she's no longer with us, and this is her family. But um, it just shows that George Washington Lewis is the son of Nathaniel and Mary, and that he was born on November 29th, 1800. Awesome. And again, this is Rhode Island, so we're talking about New England area. Did you? There's pages and pages of this. These are good sized books.
Susan,
Yeah.
I just found the answer.
Okay.
I was thinking it was in Connecticut, but the Barber collection, well, at least the Barber collection of Connecticut vital records, because there must be one in New York too, is an index to and transcription of most of the town's vital records, birth, marriage, and death from the inception of the town to the year about 1850. So they have like a statewide surname index and a bound volume for each town.
So that
Um,
would be, this would,
So the LDS they have a digitized film, and if you do a Google just the Barber collection, there's a whole bit of information of to how to find a guide on that topic, how to see the sources that Barber used, and Barber was a Lucius Barnes Barber. He was in Connecticut, so he started it in Connecticut. Ancestry.com and New England Historical Genealogical Society website also refer to this. So that's just quick. I don't want to take any more of your time, but
Marion just asked, are Quaker records acceptable?
yes.
Yes,
Yes,
Marion, I'm not gonna, they've got good records.
I have a whole presentation on Quaker research and what the DAR will and will not use.
Oh, that's cool. But I wouldn't say just because it's a Quaker for sure it's going to be approved. It's going to go under the same sort of scrutiny as any other record. However, I believe the Quakers kept very good records. So I would not at all discredit them. I would say sure, but look at it just like any other record. Here's the here's my great-grandmother's delayed birth certificate that I was talking about. And as you can see up here, it's got her name, that she was white, female, born in Monetberry, Missouri. Her father's name was Edwin D. Betterton. Her mother's name was Nancy Zinn. And then down here, it's like, okay, what supporting evidence do you have to make this claim? And the first two things she's got is a birth record of her children. And then the second one is an affidavit from her uncle saying that he was there when she was born and that, yes, that is the right information. Okay, any questions about vital records? Because now we're going to move on to census records. Okay, so pre-1850 census records cannot be used alone. I mean, they don't really tell you anything other than if you're trying to prove that a particular person, usually a man, lived in a particular place. So for that reason, they can be used, but they can't be used as, it's really hard to use them for birth date or birthplace. You look kind of like you don't agree, Barbara.
I didn't know you could see me.
I can see you. In addition to the US Census, many states conducted state censuses at, I say, irregular intervals. It was regular within their own particular community, but it wouldn't line up with another state. So, I mean, one state might do it every 3 years, another one might do it every 5 years. Just have to kind of see what that community was doing. And don't forget about the ever important mortality schedules of 1850, 60, 70, and 80. So if a person died within the census year, they would need to report it on the mortality schedules. And those are a vital record as far as the DAR is concerned. If you find somebody on a mortality schedule, that's fine, not a problem. Again, here's an example. This is 1865 in New York, so this is a state census. Again, we've got that George Lewis that we saw in the Rhode Island Vital Record book and his wife, Sally. And then, and I'm not going to go into it here, but in this particular case, I had to prove that Philadelphia was their child, and we were going through Herbert, her son. But this worked out really good because it shows you their age during this year. So at least doing that little bit of math, you can use this to prove the age and in what county of this state or in what other state or foreign country were they born. And so this does give the location of birth on this census also.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was saying that looks like a New York census.
It is.
A lot of the New York state censuses are fabulous for having the actual town plus so
Yes,
you get beyond the state, which is really cool.
I think. No, I thought on that particular application, her husband had passed away, and it actually had a note on the bottom about that on the
Mhm.
census record. So
Yep.
please don't don't shoot yourself in the foot by not looking at the state census records. Okay, this is a mortality schedule from 1880. Can you guys see it when I move my mouse point to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a mortality schedule for 1880, person who died during the year ending May 31st, 1880. And so it has their name, age at their last birthday, their gender, their color, the place where they were born, where their father was born, where their mother was born, their occupation, and then in which month. So, if you're looking at like this one's January, what would be January, of course, 1880. Here is July. Here's a one, or August. August, well, that would have been in 1879 because it's for 12 months before May 31st, 1880. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Susan, a lot of people don't realize, and I'm sure everybody in this group probably would, but if you look up at the top, that gives you your place of death.
Oh, good point.
That's what you
Absolutely.
use. Besides getting your month and year of death, you also will get the place.
That's dynamite. Yep. Okay, court records. In court records, a lot of times land records are not considered court records. Some places, I'm working on a situation right now where the probate records are actually in the orphan's court. So I mean, it just depends upon what courts they use, how they set themselves up. But a lot of places consider land records as far as part of court records, and we're just going to include them here today. So, of course, transfer of land may be to a kin and may state the relationship. And you notice I use the words may. You can have a full price offer land record to a regular son or daughter, you know, but you might also give it to them for love and consideration or one application I was just working on a little while ago said, it was funny, it was like a family thing. It was a life estate. So I guess maybe I'm using that word wrong, but it would be like me giving my house to my son for as long as I lived, and then he would have to divide it with his other siblings. Yeah, I saw that a couple of times in this family, and like I said, I think it was a family thing for them to think of it that way. So you just never know in deeds. And I got to tell on Clay again, she actually told me the other day, she's like, I did not want to work with land records. And she said, but thank you. She goes, it's crazy. Can you hear me, Clay? I'm telling on you.
Yeah, I've got it closed. The camera's closed so I can see the big screen. I can see
Oh,
your,
that's
your
fine.
pictures. But
I guess that
yeah,
means you don't mind me telling stories on you.
no, that's fine. I've recently found an entire will in a land record,
That's right.
transcribed.
That's right.
Mhm.
And you don't know.
And I have one of my ancestors that I have, the whole genealogy is in the court record.
Yeah. You got to look at it all, you know. So in probate records, whether a person left a will or didn't leave a will, that means if the if it's testate, they died with the last will and testament. If it's
Hmm.
intestate, then they died without a last will and testament. And honestly, it's cleaner when somebody leaves a will because it's like boom bang, you got what you need from it. But there's better records when you have to prove it all. Yeah, some very interesting things come up. Go ahead, Barbara. What?
No, because I think you're going to get into it in the next one. If you don't, I'll bring it. Because I see you got suits down there. So
Yeah, civil proceedings do cover suits concerning inheritances, and that's one thing that Barbara was just thinking of when we're talking about testate or intestate. Um, and suits concerning inheritances, it doesn't mean whether they're testate or not. I know one of my great grandfathers died with a will, and he left 5 girls and 5 boys. The 5 girls went off and got one attorney, and the 5 boys went off and got another one, and they had this battle. And I'll tell you what, the cleanest documents I've ever seen. It's like, here's where they all live, here's how they're related. You know,
and Susan, when you get into like you said, the intestate often produces a lot of records because you have to prove the relationships. And then a lot of times an intestate will promote these lawsuits. Well, usually it goes from the probate to, like in South Carolina, the Court of Common Pleas. So whatever state you're working with, you need to find out what is the name of the court where lawsuits will go after and the probate is the children are gonna, or whomever, the family members are going to sue one another. Then sometimes, even after the Court of Common Pleas or whatever the state calls it, they'll go into equity courts. And one other thing in South Carolina that is, from what I understand from Mike Becknell, it's the only place that has this is the states that are worth $1,000 or less go into what's called real estate papers. And often real estate papers have fabulous genealogical information because
hmm,
again, and this is fiduciary. It's dealing with money. Whenever there are documents dealing with money, there will be more accuracy. There will be more information. It's like a deed. Because it's involving the exchange of money for land, there's more care in making sure those documents are correctly recorded. Does it mean there are mistakes? Yes, there can be, but that's going to be, there's less mistakes in that than, say, a birth record or a death record, especially a death record.
very good. Absolutely. Another thing you'll find in civil proceedings is especially more historical, that are your bastardly cases where, a woman can't produce a child by herself. That only happened one time. So you can't just you can't just pop a kid and not have a dad around. And so there were times where she would have to claim who the father was, and then he would be taken to court, whether he was married or not, to support, provide financial support for that child. And there's a lot of information there too. They are a little, in my mind, I gotta be truthful, they're a little smirky to read because we would never think of doing that in our culture today, but they're also kind of interesting to see, you know.
Barbara, I got a question for Barbara.
Okay.
We just got an air letter for one of our prospective members, and the death certificate has a name of her father that is not correct. And it's on her birth certificate, on her death certificate. Cannot find anybody by that name anywhere in any neighborhood. The obituary for the mother clearly states she was only married twice, and the names of the two spouses, which is not the name that's on the child's death record.
Yeah, I'm dealing with something sort of like that. We're doing an affidavit, but I was lucky to find somebody who was given direct knowledge and can swear to it. How far back is this? What generation did you say this
Oh,
was?
it's probably fourth or better.
Mm,
But I mean, Susan, you looked at that obituary, and it clearly states, that who she is and who her children are. She names the children. She died in the daughter's house. The obituary says that she died in her daughter, and the daughter is the it's listed in the obituary who the daughter is.
Yeah, okay, so
And we're not going through the male line anyway.
yeah, I've got a similar situation right now where we had no, this was the registrar had submitted obituaries to prove the biological mother, and there was a delayed birth certificate that named the father and the mother. The death certificate named the father and the mother. Anyway, like you, we had all the different the names. She submitted a 1910 census. I forgot why, but because the 19 census showed that the child was older than the marriage, and the child was the daughter and not written a stepdaughter, to the head of household, who was the father, the genealogist stated, this is not biological. This child is the daughter of the father. Well, I could see three scenarios. Long story short, after interviewing the applicant and then an older member of the family, it turned out that the father that was listed on all these certificates is not the biological father. And it was a very sensitive issue. And when the family moved, when this child was very young, she was passed off as the child of the stepfather. And what we're going for, I don't know whether it's going to work or not. I found more obituaries of siblings and aunts and uncles where it is stated that she is the daughter, of the biological mother, plus an affidavit. But I was lucky to find someone who could state direct knowledge and state when she was told, by whom she was told, where she was when she was told, and just make a sworn statement. I don't know that you can do that or not. I don't know that you can look again. Oh, the other thing we did was we looked for probate to see if a stepfather had a will or died intestate in which this daughter would be named as a stepdaughter. We also looked for probate of the actual biological mother. And interestingly enough, in Greenville County, we can't find any record of the death of the father. We have obituaries. So Clay, I don't know whether that will help you at all. if you can find anything or take in, how many obituaries did you submit?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, if you can go back and look at all your documents and then see if you can find any other supporting, like death certificates of other children that name the parents, and
Her
can,
her brother has a death certificate where he names the mother and the father. On the daughter's death certificate, she knows the name of the mother, but she doesn't. She puts "don't know" for the father because he died probably shortly before she was old enough to know him. I
Mhm.
could not find any death records of him, other
And
than the fact.
I'm remembering
Say,
another case that had an heir where it was similar to what you're talking. It was just a strange family. And I just searched and searched for every death certificate and every obituary and wrote a bullet point. I listed the documents in bullet points, and then underneath the bullet points, say, for example, death certificate of John James, brother to, whomever the person was. This shows parents are, he was the third child of the family. And the genealogist accepted it. It was I think I sent in about 7 documents beyond what the registrar had originally put. I don't know that that'll give you any ideas or not.
just looking at the air letter, it appears to me that they did some additional research because I
Uh,
haven't seen the final copy of the application. I don't have it in front of me, but the air letter talks about 2 other obituaries of her children who list the mother as being married to her maiden. They list her mother's maiden name incorrectly. They're listing the mother's name as Summers when the mother's name is actually Swink. And there's good documentation that she is Swink, the daughter of A and B.
Well, just remember, Clay, you are working more closely and you know the lineage backwards and forwards,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure. The genealogists only have 2 hours and it's based on what is given, plus they do a little research if they've got the time.
Yeah.
And basically, it's trying, when you get to that kind of thing, what I do is when I take that air, I either highlight or underline what it is specifically that they're questioning and what their suggestions are. And then I look at the documents that I have. And then depending upon whether I have to write an analysis, I'll do an analysis. But if I can do an explanation on sometimes it's the identity of the person and not the proof of the child to the parent. And sometimes an explanation on the aliases or the names of the parent will solve the problem so that you don't have to write an analysis. But sometimes you have to look at that error and see, do they outright say you need to write an analysis, or are they
No,
suggesting
they haven't said. They just stated the issues.
or are they suggesting that you've got to prove that the child belongs to a particular parent? If they say that, then sometimes that's a good indicator that you've got to write an analysis. But I would go back and look at all your documents and then also see if you can find anything. Um, and again, like probate, more obituaries, more death certificates, and see if there's something, you just never know where something will come up, or the compilation of all of those will lead to a logical conclusion.
which makes me a little concerned because they went out and found 2 obituaries, so Jeannie's did themselves. That
I haven't even looked to see if I have even looked at these yet because I just got this late last night.
Yeah, yeah.
okay, let's go ahead
Yeah,
and go on here.
yeah. Let's go with other questions. Yeah.
Yeah, here's a land document I wanted to share with you. 21st day of November 1884, just to give you an idea of what you can find in some of these land documents. T.J. Bell and his wife Fanny Bell of the county of Davies in the state of Kentucky. I'm not going to read all of it to you. I'm just going to read you the underlined part. And this is one of the reasons that we use red underline, is because we don't expect the genies to read every word of every document. But if we refer to anything in a document, it needs to be underlined so that the genies can see it. So down here, what we see is, remember, we've got T.J. Bell and his wife Fanny Bell, and what they are selling is 5/7 of lot number 3 on file at the division of George Richardson's tract of land in Ohio County, Kentucky, amongst his heirs. Well, in order to sell like that, now you probably notice up here that there are other names: Pierce Bell and his wife Kate Bell, A.T. Bell and his wife Sally Bell, David Rogers and his wife Sally Rogers, all of the county of Ohio. So there's the 5/7 of this lot. And here are the people that are signing off on this land document. So that means they had ownership as a whole. And so that does prove a family link. A lot of times it will say, well, on this one, George Richardson's tract of land in Ohio. So that's just an idea of some of the things you can find. Here's one that really got me, and you guys got to be aware of this. This is a probate record that started in 1863. The death occurred in 1863. It wasn't finalized until 1883.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why would that happen?
Minor children.
Well, in this situation, it was in Lawrence County, South Carolina. And at that time, there was something called the Civil War and Reconstruction going on.
Oh, yeah, that's the reason, yeah.
This particular family was extremely wealthy with lots of slaves. And when they got done with the probate, there was nothing to give to any of the heirs. They had lost it all. But it did show his daughter and his granddaughter right there in the following named persons are
Legatees.
devisees and legatees under the will of William Hudgens. And he's got Henry Hudgens, J.B. Hudgens, Nancy Allison, Mary Frances Culbertson, all these. And then down here, it goes on to his screen. Here's another one that this is my particular line, and this is the one where all the girls and the guys fought one another. But do you see the petition for designation of an appraiser? They had to give all of their names and where they lived and what their relationship.
Daughter,
Isn't that a nice record?
Yeah.
And it's typed, Barbara.
Look at that.
That is a nice record. Here's another one that had a large span of time. The death occurred in 1818, and it wasn't finalized until 1841. So when you go and you look in the indexes for any kind of probate records, don't look at just the year that you believe the person died. Keep looking for a period of time.
Yeah.
And here we go with one of those, they were kind of fighting about it. Mrs. Samantha Hucks objected to the sale of the land, consideration of the case in order to examine as it was Mrs. Hucks's dower. And so, if I'm not mistaken, she went, but look at the amount of time difference, 1818 to 1841, and she had remarried. And so they're like, well, does she actually get anything? Because in the wills, a lot of time they say, as long as they stay unmarried. So this was one of those that ended up having a fight.
Hey, Susan, I don't know if everybody knows what dower rights are. You might want to that, because that's really important.
Dower rights are important when it comes to what we do. A woman typically was not allowed to own land. We're talking about pretty much the 1800s and before, unless it was under certain circumstances. Once in a while, if a woman's father died, he would leave her land. If she was unmarried, she could own it. If she was married, it would automatically go to her husband. I mean, that's just the way it was. So if her husband, however he acquired it, if he sold land, he would have to have her sign off her dower rights. Now, what that means is that that land, the value of it and what could be produced from it, was considered an asset that also took care of her. So that's where she did have rights, is if he sold land, was she in agreement with it to where she signed off her dower? Now, Barbara, I'm not studied up. I know it has something to do with when a man would pass away, she would get 1/3 of his estate as her dower.
Yeah, well, the neat thing about, and you've done a great job of explaining it, the neat thing about looking for the word dower is it proves marriage.
Absolutely.
And so if you're having a hard time proving marriage, you know that at the time of that deed, they were married.
You also, one of the things I've used it for a lot is when I cannot figure out when the wife died.
Yes,
I will go back through and I'll look for land records. When was the last time she signed dower?
yep.
Most of the times you will see there's this deed, land document, and a little paragraph at the bottom. And most of the time that's where you're going to find the dower statements.
And then you can do her death as a post that date,
Right.
that document.
But a lot of times a census is 10 years. That's a lot of time. If you can squeeze that in a little bit by finding out that she died after 1863, that's a lot closer than just before 1870. You know. Okay, Bible records. Can we use those? What do you guys think? Can we use Bible records for acceptable documentation?
Absolutely.
Well, I know you have. But we had to check off a few little of the things. You've had some really great Bible records, Clay. They cannot be used for the first three generations because we have had vital records for that long. You know, that's why they're saying you can't use it for the first three generations. And vital records have existed. Usually, you want to see a Bible record for something before vital records. Dates in a Bible cannot be before the publication of the Bible itself.
Except, Susan, in one circumstance. I don't know that you're aware of it or not. A lot of women were given a Bible upon marriage. So say the book was published in 1842, and she gets married in 1843. She's given this Bible that was published in 1842, and she writes in her marriage and then continues the births of her children. DAR has accepted that.
Okay, that's great.
I have a Bible just like that.
Pardon me?
I said I have an actual Bible from '59, and then it gives the date that it was given to the child, which
Yes.
was probably at his marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Susan's correct and I'm sure she took this straight out of the guidelines.
Yes.
And
The publication date is important.
And she is correct, but there are some situations, like what you're talking about. What I'm saying is that where it was common for a bride to be given a Bible, at the time of her wedding, and that year be just a little bit before. Now, if it's like 10 or 15 years before, that's going to be the problem. That could be a problem.
Providence is real important when it comes to Bible records.
Yeah.
How did the Bible get from its first use to being a Bible that you're using for a DAR application? So there are a lot of Bible records in the GRC, which is part of the GRS. Well, yeah, on the DAR website, there is a library of Bible records that are available, and those are typed up usually, and those go through the same evaluation, meaning that in order to use a Bible record to support an application, you need to submit the title page where it shows the date that is published, not the outside book that says, oh, this is really a Holy Bible.
Right.
But you need to have the date that the book was published, the Bible published, and then all handwritten family entries. You have to have, so you just want to use it to prove the birth of one man, you have to send in all the handwritten entries. That's what
Yes.
the genealogical guidelines say.
We had that one application for Kathy that had 2 Bible records in it.
It did. And one of
Yeah.
the providences that Clay was able to use is that a gentleman sent her copies that she requested from the Bible, and the copies came from somebody that sent them to him. And so the email that came with that Bible record showing where he had got it was acceptable. She got it through somebody that emailed it to her, that it was emailed to him, and yet they could show it actually existed. It wasn't something that was just created and bought off eBay. I want to get to, oh, look, Clay, here's that email. And what Clay wrote down here is, this is the email I, Keela Clay, Daichi's client, received from William Larry Holman, along with the images of this Bible. So it still showed providence.
Perfect.
Oh, we're going to
Oh,
look at the
look how
Bible.
pretty. Isn't that beautiful?
It is. And I'm going to blow up to here at the very bottom. You can barely read it. So I typed it to where everybody could see it. There's where the date is, where it was on the title page. And then here are all of the entries that was on the family record. Oh, look, it's a real family Bible. It's got little clippings from the newspaper, note of thanks. It just shows so much of the authenticity of it. And then on a blank page, here was all this family history. And of course, what we needed was the stuff that they squeezed at the very bottom.
And the one at the very bottom, I have his actual Bible, family Bible.
And see, this was even one of the pages that we had to submit, because along the margin of one of the pictures in the Bible was some more information. This is probably one of the most real family Bible records I've ever seen. Everybody thinks it has to be pristine and on this little framed sheet, but no, this was important to these people, and they just wrote it wherever they could.
Sometimes they'll stick in little pieces of paper to continue the lineage, and as long as in the provenance or statement can be made where that paper came from.
All of these records right here were all in that same family Bible. And
This-
so, what's that?
This person that got this family Bible took him years to extract it from the family. And he has had it preserved, and he has put it in the Orangeburg archives.
That's good. Okay, one of the things I wanted to get to, because I know that usually what is acceptable documentation, a large part of that conversation or confusion comes to published sources. What I'm talking about is the history of Ohio County, or the history of whether it's a county or a town or club, or can that be used? Of course, can't be used for the first 3 generations. We know that. Original sources are always preferred, meaning all of the other things that we've talked about, but sometimes it's good you can see something in writing, you can't find a record for it. So the genies, when they get these published documents, these books, they actually have a criteria, and this is directly from the genealogical guidelines. They go through and they check off boxes. Does this book cite acceptable sources? Where did they get the information? Does it include complete dates and places? Does it provide historical perspective? And that is more important than what it sounds. Does it try to build the history of the community in a way that makes sense, instead of just spotting on a few important people? Does it contain information derived from personal knowledge or interview of those with personal knowledge? And that's important too. It's kind of, I know with a lot of the genies that I've talked to, they're pretty much saying that they don't believe that the national genies will accept a historic biography unless it was published before 1900. Are you hearing the same thing, Barbara?
I'll wait till you finish, and then if you want me to
Okay.
state some things that I
Okay.
personally
Go
have
on.
experienced with the genealogist, I will.
Okay.
This one is a very tough one.
You guys can't fit this one in a box because national genealogists all have their own personal opinion about it. I
And it's
can't,
a case by case,
Yep.
case by case.
And like I said, this list that I'm showing you is in the genealogical guidelines. So they have to look at this too. One of the things that they're looking for, and the next point brings this up, does the author have personal knowledge? So in these historical biographies, somebody will say, we're going to tell you about this wonderful person by the name of James Smith. Okay. And he is does this, that, the next thing. And his father was Raymond Smith, who was born on this date in this place, who married this woman. And his father was, and I've seen that so many times where you actually get 3 generations. Okay. So if the author of the book, who is making this big compilation from talking to other people, is actually talking to this man that the article is about, does that man have knowledge of who his parents and grandparents are? Yeah. If James Smith is who the article is about, tells the author, here's my parents, where they were born, here's my grandparents and who they were, that works. That's firsthand knowledge that the author is getting. However, if the author is writing about a person whose, you know, ancestry came over in 1620 and the book is written in 1935, they're not going to have that firsthand knowledge.
Yeah.
Another thing that they actually use as criteria is, does the introduction or bibliography explain the sources that were used? So read the preface. Look in the back and see if there is a list of where information was extracted from to create this information. And does available documentation contradict the information that you're reading in the book? Those are the things that they have to check mark when they go to decide whether they're going to accept it or not. And I will tell you, if they don't check mark all of them, at that point, they've got a gut level feel on whether they believe it's acceptable or not. Okay, Barbara, go.
Well, originally, when I used these guidelines, I was told directly that you didn't have to have all of them, but at least 4 was a good starting point. And up until recently, I've been able to get all of mine through when I've had to use them. I am almost not using published sources anymore because of the most recent experience. I had a book that had been used in previous applications. This was for a supplemental for a member of our chapter. And I took every single one of those bullet points and sent in the preface, the explanations, proved that the author had personal knowledge. Also, found the obituary of the author where it stated where he lived and how he got his information. I mean, this book had complete dates and places and historical, it had everything. And one of the leading genealogists that I have a great deal of respect for did not accept it. And he tends to not be accepting. And I've been looking at, like, Susan likes to look at the genealogist comments on the citation pages and see so I have been starting to pay attention to published sources, and a lot of them that have been utilized in the past, they're putting parentheses around and they're not accepting the information. And this genealogist even wrote that the author did not have personal knowledge. Somehow he either misread, misunderstood, or whatever. Again, they have 2 hours, and if it's already a complex application, maybe he sped through it too fast.
Or maybe not, just not going to do it. I mean,
Don't know.
yeah.
Susan?
It hasn't made me think any less of him, but it has made me really, really look at and the same individual this summer, I went to ask him about an old book published in 1844. It had outstanding footnotes. The guy was a historian, and it was referring to a land patent and office arbitration that was transcribed. And he looked at it and he said, well, it states that it exists and where it is, and you know what you've got to do. And I said, I got to find the original document. He said, yes. And I said, but this
Wow.
is a transcription. He says, I know, but the footnote says that, it was taken care of by the Secretary of State in New York. Well, I contacted the archives in New York. Long story short, it doesn't exist. They don't have it. It might have existed, but they don't have it. And they also said that arbitrations in New York often, the documents were never returned. It was just, noted in everybody was happy with the decision. And later on, this book was a huge, thick book, but later on there was a tiny footnote 20 pages later, referring back to that one that I wanted to use, saying that all the documents were in the possession of the author in 1844. So I'm not going to be able to find that original document. So I had to look for something else because I knew that if I sent it in, he wasn't going to accept it.
You
So
gonna say something, Clay?
Yeah, I got to go pick up my grandson.
Okay, bye.
So I'll see y'all later. Thank you. Enjoyed.
So Susan, in relationship to this, I think you should, if you've got a really good published source, evaluate it, use these. I keep these guidelines in my little guidebook, my guidelines book off to the side so that I don't have to go digging through to find it, and try it, but be real wary that there's been a tendency not to accept them. And you're right that most of the time don't even bother if it's after 1900, maybe 1910ish, but there just seem to be not doing it as much. Now
Yeah, because there's
the town histories where it says, like especially up in New England, where they are transcribing or they are stating what has been put in the town clerk's office, those are often accepted.
but those are not typically narrative stories,
No, they're not.
right?
But this has up their published sources.
And when I joined, you could use biographies, you could use historical biographies,
Right.
and I loved it. I really did because it just put more flesh on the bones, while we're playing with dead people. It made these people come to life a little bit more, getting to read about their lives instead of just looking at dry documents. But I do have to admit, some of the blatant errors that I would read in these historical documents was sad, or the historical books, you know. So, I mean, certain names that they had for some of my husband's relatives, especially, they seem to be very plagued with, well, they lived in this town, but nobody really knew them, so we're going to make up this story, you know, which I think may have happened. Let's see. We have, okay. We're wrapping this up, but um, another thing that's good to know, a supporting document used on a previously verified application does not guarantee that it will be accepted on your application. So you can go out and you can buy somebody else's work. I'm sure you've probably seen that. So you're looking at you're looking at on the GRS, you're looking at somebody whose line you want to tie into, and you're wondering what kind of documents did they use? Well, for $10, or what is it, 35, you can buy a copy of their application and all the supporting documents, and it comes pretty fast. I've done that before. But just because it was used to verify that application does not mean that you can use it just because of that. It could still be a good document, but you can't say it was used once and that's good because things change. So somebody just asked if the published source is in the DAR library. Does that have some value? No, not at all. Sorry.
Value to finding more documents or value to finding some humor, like the stories you were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to find a lot of them there. They do not, it's a wonderful repository. It's a great library, but they do not vet everything that's in that library. They will make decisions on whether they allow it or not, but they don't go through every fact that's listed in each book. That's
And there are books, as you know, Susan, there are books that will be accepted, but
Sure.
it's not guaranteed at all.
Right. And that's the next point on this. Information in the GRC or in the DAR library are not guaranteed to be accepted. Same sort of thing as in the GRC, you know, where there's a bunch of the GRC. The best part of it to me is the compilations that have been created by various DAR chapters. And if you have not gone out there and looked, do, because there's a lot of good stuff. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be accepted just because it's associated with the DAR website. It's just as good as any other thing that you might find on any other website. And a genie can always send an AIR, additional information requested. That is their right. That is their job. And we do not debate with them. We call it Genie Love.
Politely.
Love our genies.
Politely.
And one of the, I sent this to you too, you guys. This is one of the reasons we love our genies. They know to a certain extent what our work is about. And so one of the things I sent you was, I think it's 26 pages of links to various websites that have got, and again, just because it's on this website doesn't mean that they will accept it on any of these websites. It's just another place for us to go look. And I think, oh, no, I was just showing, I'm not going to go through it all, but just to give you, each one of these is a link to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania or to the Charleston Orphan House Index. You know, every one of these titles is a link to another website. And like I said, 26 pages of it, separated by states, but then they also, if you look over here, it's not just states. There's online libraries, newspapers, marriage records, obituaries, Bible records. Those are all grouped together. That's the focus of those websites. Then you get down into the state specific later. So it is a, you know, we all have our go-tos, ancestry.com and family search, and, you know, then we've got our newspaper links that we like. And what I like about this is it gives us more, much more. And the website is large and it's growing, so we should be aware. So that's all I have as far as acceptable documentation. Are there any other questions about it? Are there any other questions or thoughts before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you all very, very much. And thanks for letting me be in this group.
Oh,
And thank you for sending this information.
are you going to be going? Do I have you on the list for the training session in Pawleys Island?
And when is that? I don't think I know anything about it.
Well, Pam, where do you live?
I live in Pawleys Island.
Yeah, it's going to be February 8th.
Okay. February 8th. What is
Mhm.
it? Carolina Gold?
Yes. Well, no. Carol Bambi, the district director, is the one that's kind of putting the information out there.
All right. Well, just between y'all and me, our regent's not real techie. So
Okay.
it probably went to our region and didn't come to me.
Probably. Why don't I send it to you? I'll send you some information.
I would
Just to
love
get-
that. Thank you very, very much. And I would imagine I'll be there.
Okay. I want to just let everybody know I am going around as much as I can through the state to talk about how to review somebody else's application, what to look for. This particular workshop, you will be given an application to actually review. You will be given time to review it after we talk about what you need to do. And then you will get the verified application to look at what did the genies really do. I think it's important for us to get our hands on an application instead of trying to figure out we're hoping it's what we are submitting is accurate. It's the way it's supposed to be. But what do they want to see? So that's what this is all about, Pam.
Well, I don't really have an official genealogist title
That's
in my
okay.
chapter. So whatever. So I just want to learn for myself. That's
Yeah,
why I'm
that's
really glad y'all are including me. Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Susan, can I tell about, does anybody live up near the Rock Hill Fort Mill area or can drive there? Because Gina Bobo's chapter is doing a genealogy workshop in conjunction with a patriotic showcase on, I think it's January 25th. If I think she's going to be sending out some information about that in the future. And also my vice chair and I are going to try to do some lineage research videos to help with nitty-gritty lineage research aspects. She and I have a hard time with our schedule. She gets to travel a lot, but we hope to not do it as frequently as Susan is, but maybe, get into some more like nitty-gritty research aspects.
Well, I would love it if you would include me on that too.
Well,
I think she's liking this stuff.
I am. It's called addictive.
what chapter are you in?
When y'all,
When y'all.
Georgetown, Johnny
Yeah,
Cowan's,
I'm trying to think. Okay.
Candy Gallup's registrar.
Okay.
All right. If there's no other questions, I will be here again Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and you're welcome to join. We're going to be talking about a lot of the same stuff, but with a different audience. So since we're kind of a discussion based and not a lecture, it might have some different things, but it may not. So you're welcome to join us.
Oh, I'd like to encourage something else, Susan. There are a lot of fabulous free videos on various topics. And also, there is a program that's called Legacy, and it only costs about $49.50. It might have gone up a little bit.
You talking about the webinars or are you talking about just
Yes.
the application?
No, the webinars,
Okay.
Legacy has the webinars, and like one I think this 19th, Elizabeth Shown Mills, who is no longer speaking at or very rarely speaking at workshops. Anyway, for $49, you get access to over 2,000 videos of all kinds of topics, and they're fabulous. And another friend of mine has told me how much she really enjoys them, and my vice chair loves them too. And that's just a fabulous way of learning more about genealogy and how to find documents, whether you do that for the $49 subscription or just do some web searches for videos, genealogy videos, and you'll get to know some of the national presenters.
I like that genealogy TV also. I've not subscribed to it, but she's got some really good pointers. Just one of my favorites. There's a lot. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, if budget is an issue, there are freebies out there. Sometimes they're ones that have already been in a paid subscription and then they're released, later. The big hot topic right now is AI. And if you have an opportunity, Susan, I know that's one thing I want to address when I do my Zooms, but Family Search's AI is incredible. I have found about 6 documents that were broke the brick wall for other applicants.
I'm working on one right now where found out that she was going through the wrong son and she was having a hard time proving it. But when I did AI on the mother's name, found this whole big file of loose probate records.
Yeah, and the thing that's neat about the Family Search is that with using AI in a different way, you've got to learn how to make the prompts, learn how to write the questions. It's not like doing a Google search that is so simple and easy, although there is maybe one AI that's more similar to Google search. But the Family Search AI, they don't call it AI, they call it
Labs.
full text labs, right? Full text
I call it
labs.
labs, yeah.
Full text.
Full text.
You don't find it through the normal way of going into FamilySearch.org. So you
Right.
don't go to FamilySearch.org and go to the catalog and find the labs. What I do is I just put in my search engine full text labs at FamilySearch.org, and then you can bookmark it and it'll take you there. And it's very simple searching. But what it does is it searches through so many records that would take you weeks, days, months, years. And when I heard about it last February from one of Judy Russell, how she had looked for something for 30 years and found 2 deeds that she could not find, and she's an incredible researcher. Then I thought, hey, this has got to really be something. So I encourage you to, when you're working on things, if you get stuck, to use that. But do a search for full text labs at FamilySearch.org. And
Thank you so much for
all you're
sharing
doing
that.
is entering like a name or a place or a
Well,
date.
you can, if you put the name in quotes, what I do is I put the
Yeah,
name in quotes and then it's got a selection field that helps you drill down to a place or a type of record or a
yeah.
time frame that makes it very nice as it narrows down the results that you get.
And they have a little video to help you learn and then there's also, we Googled a little study group that I'm in. We Googled a free video. It was actually on Legacy originally, and it's on YouTube. And she was excellent in teaching how to use it and showing the results.
And I'm sure if you just do a Google search, you can find it. All right. You guys, thank you so much for being here and being a part of the Volunteer Genealogist Committee. I appreciate that. Um, there's some talk going out there. There's a couple of chapters. I know I say this, and there's nothing happening with it, but there's a couple of chapters that have contacted me and they're like, well, we might need some help soon. But in order to get a true volunteer genealogist assigned to them, they have to go through certain steps. I want you guys to be ready. And I think that would be a lot of fun. So I will see you Saturday morning, if not next month. Merry Christmas. Have a happy new year. It was really good to be with you.
Thank you. The same